Jonathan's speech.
Madam General Evaluator, our guest, all you Toastmasters, and especially our speaker, Jonathan. My team will be presenting their overall comments at the beginning as to what they're covering in their feedback to Jonathan. We'll begin our evaluation team presentation with Catherine. Please go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam General Evaluator, my fellow Toastmasters, and especially Jonathan. Jonathan, you need to be applauded for standing up with such short notice and the long schedule that you have in your work. I think that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of working the midnight candle, and I thank you for doing that and stepping up. You asked me to check in and follow up on your audience awareness. You said you wanted your conversation to be pithy, light, and jovial. And so I have found this to be a tough assignment, especially over Zoom, because of the audience that's attending here this morning. 6 of the people in the audience had their screens muted, or they have that artificial picture in front of them, so we really can't see what their expressions are and follow that. I think it's also very difficult to make that general assessment of how well this is presented when we're looking at screens of people and not really being able to get that body language that we get when we're in the energy of the room with people. So I want to thank you for your cheerfulness and your voice. You do a smooth delivery. You're comfortable with speaking with audiences and your awareness. I think that in the very beginning, the people were very receptive. They were listening attentively. They smiled on they had smiled on their faces, and some of them were nodding their heads forwards and up and down. And they were very attentive, but it seemed to languish as you talked and over the time that you spoke. I'm thinking that one of the things that might be helpful in having and in keeping the audience engaged is how you present yourself and how you are coming across the screen to us. It seemed that you used the same repetitive motions over and over, and you were at a distance, and it felt to me like if you were closer and I would have seen more of your body expression and how you were physically engaging, that might have had an effect on the connection and with the people in the audience. Maybe instead of talking about a whole broad general number of topics, if you had actually come in and given us some personal examples, maybe 3 personal examples in that time frame of what it felt like to be an albino, or what it feels like in various situations, so that we really would get a sense of feeling rather than more of a general overview, that would have been helpful to us. So I'd like to suggest to you that as you work and do this a little bit further, that you spend a little more time in figuring out how you want to present yourself to the audience and be engaged, so that we can see more of you, and perhaps work on those 2 or 3 stories that you'd like to include in your conversation so that we are more engaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. It's obvious that you were truly listening. You weren't just hearing what our speaker was doing, and appreciate the feedback you've given to him. We will now hear from Carolyn for her evaluation of the speech and what content she's going to evaluate.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters, our guests, and Jonathan. Jonathan, my assignment today was to look at the topic matter. Was it fit for this crowd? And also your integration of jokes and anecdotes. I want to say that during your speech, I laughed and smiled a lot. I found myself nodding and smiling and agreeing. And though I was one of the people with my camera off, I know that there were a lot of people who were doing the same. You picked a great topic to talk about, because your general purpose of your speech was to talk about summer and looking forward to it and the experience of, and that's something that everyone has in common. And your specific purpose was to talk about your experience. You integrated a lot of anecdotes, fun anecdotes and fun jokes, or more anecdotes than jokes, into your speech. You had words like bunker of doom. You listed your two dark caverns that you work in, your room that is dark, but you turned up the light just a little bit for us to see you in your tractor trailer. You talked about that people love or hate summer and that some people long for it, and you gestured and you elongated the word long. You talked about summer being your nemesis. You lowered your voice when you said bunker of doom, and that summer is your frenemy. At the end, the reconcilement. There's a couple of opportunities in this speech I think that you have, and one of them was that tonally your voice was very similar throughout the speech. You did take the opportunity to say bunker of doom, but you didn't change your tone throughout the rest of the speech. So every anecdote in every speech had the same general tone to it. I think you had the opportunity to use a couple of different specific stories, as was said by Catherine, to either maybe get closer to us and express that way. And then also using different tonality might help capture and keep your audience interest, and also to take your audience along on your journey with you. So everyone experiences summer. Everyone has a love-hate relationship with summer, especially in Minnesota. Sorry, my phone's dinging over here. But we all have also a love-hate relationship with all of the Minnesota seasons. You know, the winter, it's not hot, and the summer, it's too hot. So I think you had the opportunity to really bring the audience along using your tonality and also some of those. I loved your speech. I also have a love-hate relationship with summer. My first sunburn of the year, I break out in hives, so I feel ya. And, you know, I hope you're able to enjoy what's left of the summer, and thank you for your speech.
And thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate the feedback that we've heard from the two evaluators. I am now to respond to Jonathan in regards to his physical emotions. And since both of you have made some comments in those areas, I go, what's left for the third evaluator? And since I don't have screen ability like Edward does, Siobhan, I'm not going to put up any fancy movements of how this is supposed to be done. I believe that our gestures are challenged on these Zoom meetings. And I'd like to thank Jonathan for putting forth the effort to see what he could do with that in this type of a speech of humor. I admire that our guest is here learning from us as we give our feedback to the speaker. And I thank all of you for being here today too, to help us get through the Saturday Morning Live Zoom meetings. I'd like to comment on how Jonathan started his speech with his wide open gestures. He had special arm movements. I particularly liked when he was talking about two different sides hate, and he got on one side, he really exaggerated how it was done, and I go, well, move over to the other side for the other, and he neglected to do that because I'm sure he was thinking about the words that were going to come out of his mouth. When we give these speeches, perhaps to help us with our gestures would be the ability to sometimes shorten our sentences, because that allows for pausing and also helps us think through of what gesture we're going to do next. We may not realize the importance of even moving our body, not just with our hands, but actually our whole body from one side to the other when we're speaking. The other thing is, as was mentioned for Keith to put his chin down, I look for times for Jonathan to do that. I realize when you're having eye focus disabilities that isn't always easy. But as you got into your speech, you became more comfortable as to how to look at the screen, even though you have your cap on, so that we could see your eyes and as well as your smile. I challenge you to even try to stand up once in a while during your speech, because it's surprising how that can be done even on Zoom. I've seen it done in other clubs. The other thing is we seem to shy away from visuals. I'd like to have seen you hold up a picture off to the side, so not to cover up your face, but just of that bright sun and really beaming down on people on a beach, because visuals are still important even in our Zoom meetings, as we noticed when Edward was giving his presentation of how he used visuals to give his feedback. We we'd like to have you redo this speech because you've been given some feedback, and too often we get the feedback and then we do nothing else with our speech, because if you brought it back to us and we saw the comparison of the feedback to what you did when we saw you today, we'd realize the value of our evaluations. I'd like to tell you that I can't see what the timing is, so I don't know where I am with my timing for feedback. So if someone could speak it out, I would know that I'm close to
Red.
my time.
You're in the red.
Okay, then we'll turn it over.
Green.
We'll turn it to our speaker to give us some feedback. Jonathan, please.
Thank you to all three of you. I really appreciate it. This has been, as Catherine had kind of pointed out, I was coming up with this speech between Wednesday and today, and it was not one of the myriad of pocket speeches that I kind of always have on hand. And trying to express this in a relatable manner for me, I found I kind of struggled with it. This is probably one of the few speeches that I felt kind of the least prepared going into. I think one of the big things that I do struggle with is I kind of have the same hand motions. I have the same things that I do all the time. And so I was kind of trying to push myself a little further, but also obviously with Zoom, there are certain constraints. And I know that one of the things that you guys had mentioned was, maybe come in a little closer, but my goal is to not be doing this to you. I felt like that might take away slightly from the speech.
Jonathan, thank you for that. And I believe you can get some more comments from the people too, but now we'd like to have the audience give us some. I think, how much time do we have left for that, for the audience feedback?
2 minutes.
1 minute? Okay, so if we could have
Yeah.
two, you give 30-second feedback, we'd appreciate that.
Jonathan, this is Jamie. One of the things I noticed is it looks like your camera is a little bit above you, and your hat is one thing we've mentioned. We can't really see your eyes with your hat, but it's kind of your signature. So you need to have it because it makes you you. But if you can find a way to adjust where your camera is, either higher or lower, that might help so we can still see your eyes. I also noticed on laptops and cell phones, it's sometimes hard to see where the camera is. With my laptop, I just put something that's bright right above the camera that would stay on my laptop. That way I'm looking at the bright thing instead of trying to find the little dark camera, because my laptop doesn't have a light. You can also just have something on the top center of your screen that's brighter that will gear your eyes towards the camera. This got better throughout the speech, but I think that was one thing that eye contact was part of why some people kind of waned towards the end of the speech.
Thank you, Jamie. Do we have time for one more comment?
Jonathan,
Well,
on the question of depth in terms of position from the camera, one of the things that I've learned over the last few months is that a little goes a long ways. So if you look at my picture right now, if I move about 4 inches closer to the camera, that has a pretty large effect. So what the distance that you would be from your audience in terms of depth in a live environment is probably going to be a lot larger, but for the same effect in a camera environment, you can do it with a very small amount. So even if you look at my hand here, it moved about an inch there, it moved about another inch there, and it moved about another inch there. So you can get that effect that people are suggesting, but without getting really close.
Thank you, Jamie and Jim, for that feedback, because we're always learning, and not just as our speaker learning, we as an audience are getting all this knowledge taken into our being too. Turn our evaluation team back to our general evaluator, Anna.